Remote probiert. Gut, dann fange ich mal an.
Okay.
Sind alle anwesend? Well, if you have a remote.
Ja, ist eigentlich ein bisschen stressig. Okay. Ja, ich habe ihn einmal kurz erreicht und dann.
Ein Stuhl zu wenig davon. Reicht mir dann vielleicht Gut, ich fange an, ja? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to welcome you to the side event of the government of Morocco and Perspectives Climate Research. So I am Axel Michaelowa, Research Director in Perspectives Climate Research. I will start a short scene setter and then we'll get into the panels. You see, we have a very large panel, so we need to be very effective to move through. So we will first start with a panel that looks into pioneering countries, Morocco and Ghana. Then afterwards we will discuss on the side of those who provide capacity building. We have GIZ, GGGI and Perspectives. And then we will have a dialogue with the Article 6 credit buyers. And we are really proud to have 4 key buying countries and also private entities. So we have Switzerland, and we have both the Swiss government as well as the Click Foundation. We have Sweden and Singapore represented, and I hope that we'll be, at the end also be able to discuss with you in the audience. So the key aspects of Article 6 leadership, of course, mean that first, as a country, you need to understand what you do want to use Article 6 for. Here in this graph, you see that there can be different uses of Article 6 ITMOs. They can be used for nationally determined contribution, but they can also be used for the voluntary carbon market. And of course, this has an impact on how host countries deal with the authorization process. And it's of course no surprise that the authorization is being heavily discussed in the negotiations that are ongoing a few meters behind us, because the country needs to decide what is the share of credits it wants to authorize, how many mitigation outcomes does it want to keep, what is the relationship to the NDC. So these are all aspects that need to be dealt with. And I just want to highlight our host and co-organizer Morocco, because Morocco has been very early in making strong linkages between the NDC and international carbon markets, and also the NDC builds on prior work that has been undertaken, for example, in the context of the Partnership for Market Readiness. So I think the Moroccan example is nicely demonstrating what the outcome of good capacity building can be. And of course, this is continuing, and we are looking forward to hear from Rachid Tahiri the current approaches to Article 6. And of course, we also have various enabling initiatives, and I'm really happy that some of the key players like GGGI are on the panel today. We are hoping that we'll also have Daniel Benefo from Ghana with us shortly, because Ghana is now the front runner in Article 6 host countries worldwide. Actually, just 2 days ago, the first authorization of ITMOs from Ghana was completed in a collaboration with Switzerland, and of course it will be very interesting to hear how this was achieved. So the key questions we want to discuss in our event relate to what ingredients does it need to become a leader in Article 6? What kind of institutional setting? What kind of epistemic community? And of course also understanding of the sales potential. What are the requirements of the currently active ITMO buyers? And the other panel has many of the key buyers on it. So with regard to volumes, maybe also with regard to prices, there of course we don't know much yet, and also the characteristics of the ITMOs with regard to environmental integrity and sustainable development co-benefits. And of course, last but not least, how can those current leaders preserve their advantage as the competition will increase? We've seen under the CDM that the first movers sometimes had difficulties to actually preserve their leadership, and yeah, this may be a topic that is quite important. So without further ado, I would now give the floor to Rachid to present on the Moroccan Article 6 approaches. Rachid, please.
Good evening. Today I will present the experience of Morocco regarding Article 6. But before our experiences in terms of CDM and NAMAs and carbon markets and PMR. So Morocco is building on its CDM experiences and is looking how it can develop carbon markets and mitigation efforts and facilitate the introduction of clean technology. Also, Morocco aims to pilot a carbon market instrument based on our experiences with NAMAs and also with projects done with the World Bank about partnership for market readiness. These projects give us a lot of opportunities in terms of lesson learned, but also how to use appropriate carbon markets and pricing mechanism at the national level for specific sectors. So Morocco, as you know, under CDM has already established or put in place a framework of governance about the NDA, National CDM Council, also the CDM Secretariat. Also, Morocco has submitted 37 projects, but unfortunately just 17 projects who have been registered. Regarding our experience in Partnership for Market Readiness, PMA, so we cover 3 sectors: power generation, phosphates, and cements. And the scope of these projects regarding these 3 sectors is the development of renewable energies in the electricity sectors, also for the self-production of electricity, controlling electricity demand, but also improving the efficiency of the process in these target industrial sectors. In PMR, we have developed 3 concepts, 3 scenarios about the introduction of carbon pricing using the tax, but also the cape and the trade. As you know, each instrument has advantage and disadvantage in terms of effectiveness. So I will present each scenario. So for the scenario one, for instance, the positive side is the maximized environmental integrities. So we envisage to put short carbon taxes followed by allowance trading system. But this scenario has a kind of a constraint. For instance, the challenges regarding how to foster the acceptability and also how to ensure a high level of institutional efforts, especially among the actors who are in difficulties for allowance trading system. For this scenario two, the positive side is it could maximize the acceptability because we are using the incentives. But we think that by using just incentives, this scenario doesn't guarantee the effectiveness. So regarding the third scenario is positive sides, optimized level of efforts by introducing carbon tax that is a little bit easy to implement. But we can manage to reduce the constraints of this scenario 3. As you know, any carbon pricing instruments, whether regulatory or voluntary, rely on MRV system to ensure the compliance with emission reduction. What the project highlights that unfortunately Morocco and the private sector has a lot of MRV, but there is not harmonization or homogeneity between them. That's why there is a huge effort to adjust this dysfunction. Also, Morocco is very glad also to tell or to report about his experience regarding the setting up a national greenhouse gas inventory system. With at Tahiri, we have set up this system. This system involves all the key sectors at two levels. First level, National Commission of Inventory, which involve all of the partners, and another one at another level, operational level, we have a unity which encompass the key sectors, energy sectors, land use, agriculture, industry, also the waste. And we have a national coordinator among our team. So regarding our inventory, Morocco has developed according to 226 IPCC guidelines, inventories of greenhouse gases since 2024 until 28. And there is an average annual growth rate about 2.5%. So this slide show clearly that in energy sector who generate a lot of emission comparing with the other sectors. Our NDC, it was very ambitious. Our target is to reduce 45.5% at 2030 with targets unconditional 18.3 and almost we have 61 projects. 34 projects are unconditional and 27 are conditional. So our exchange the utmost with our partners, other countries, focus more on these 27 conditional projects. So this slide shows just the the baseline, the trajectory of unconditional measures and conditional measures, and also show clearly the 9 sectors that contribute in terms of reduction of greenhouse gases in our NDC. Also, I am very glad also to share with you this experience. Morocco has elaborate a partnership convention which involves 6 departments, private sector, so civil society, and the key ministries in terms of decarbonization of our economy. And a lot of studies were launched in terms of the updates of the carbon footprint tool, in terms of elaboration of methodologies for certification of offset projects, also development of a communication platform for using the carbon footprint tool and methodologies, as well training on carbon footprints. Also, we have established by decree a national commission of climate change and biodiversity, and under the subcommission of climate change we have 4 working groups: finance group, mitigation group, adaptation, and negotiation. So regarding our subjects of discussion today, so Morocco is very ambitious to participate effectively at the cooperative approaches under the Article 6. So, as you know, in order to be efficient in our participation, we have to already set up a series of dispositive and prerequisites to authorize and also to monitor the use of ITMOS for the purpose of achieving NDC. So, we are working with our partners to implement our roadmap, which aim to set up in DNA, also to apply the corresponding adjustments required, also to ensure a reporting. As you know, now ongoing discussion, negotiation, we have a text about 52 pages regarding 6.2, and we highlight this issue regarding the corresponding adjustments, the reporting, the initial report, the annual report, the regular reports, what is the content of each report, and also the review of this reporting, as well the domestic registry and its connection with the international registry. Also, we intend to develop methodologies based on our CDM experiences, and also procedures for calculating the baseline and additionality, as well the accreditation of independent verifier. So, as I mentioned before, so we are working to finalize a roadmap based on our needs, but also based on the requirements of the text of Article 6.2 and 6.4. So we intend to put in place institutional arrangements, legal basis, as well the required functions and methodologies. And also we are very optimistic about the support that we can have from the other countries, our partners. So Morocco has already signed with Switzerland an MOU regarding the exchange of ITMOS here in the COP27. We are very glad to achieve this event, this process, this step. Also, with Click Foundation, we have a lot of activities that are ongoing, and there is a discussion, this technical discussion with South Pole, also a technical discussion with First Climate. First one regarding the energy efficiency in industry and tourism sectors. Second one regarding the waste to energy. Also with Norway, among us someone will talk about that. So under the project DAPA, designated Article 6 policy approaches. Singapore, we have already signed a MOU regarding the exchange of ITMOS. South Korea, we have signed a general MOU, and exchange of ITMOS is among other components. Finally, to conclude, just I want to highlight that we are working on introduction of the carbon taxes and switch to ETS of European Union that can be linked with to regional or international carbon markets. And finally, also, we are formulating TOR regarding the roadmap activities in order to implement this roadmap with bilateral and multilateral partnership. And in this regard, I want to thank Switzerland, Norway, and Germany, and the other country for the trust regarding Morocco. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rachid. So I would now like to invite Daniel Benefo from Ghana to report on his experiences, and I welcome him to this panel.
All right, thank you very much. It's my second time coming to this room today. I wanted to start from the policy basis for this engagement. In 2019, the government of Ghana commissioned a study to assess the feasibilities of carbon pricing options in Ghana as part of the overall mitigation policy packages for the country. And the assessment looked into 4 areas: the environmental effectiveness, the legal effectiveness, the institutional effectiveness, and also the political alignment of carbon pricing policies in the country. The assessment concluded similarly what my colleague from Morocco indicated. It recommended the need to adopt carbon taxation among the various carbon pricing policies for the government to adopt. However, the issue that was considered a barrier was the point of regulation, whether we should focus on an upstream or downstream part of the energy market or the industry market. So that is still on the table, and the government is yet to decide on where it will introduce the carbon taxation policy in the country. The other recommendation from the study was about the engagement in the carbon offset markets, especially the international crediting schemes. And that was the basis for our engagement in the Article 6 mechanisms. Again, this was based on the mitigation rationale of our country. Our total national emissions stands around 60 million tons as at 2021. And the projections along the BAU scenario, the minimum part of the projection puts the value at 110 million tons by 2030. And for that matter, the government adopted an absolute mitigation goal of cutting down the projected 100 million tons by around 64 million tons. So that is the broad mitigation policy for the government as we speak. And out of that 64 million tons, about 24 million tons are then available for the international carbon crediting schemes that the government has opted to undertake. And for that matter, we saw the need to use Article 6 as one of the ways of achieving the 24 million tons that the government has earmarked for the achieving the 24 million tons out of the 68 million tons. And for that reason, we then had to engage in a number of activities. And one of it was a creation of the bilateral corporations. And I'm sure my colleague already mentioned the engagement with our partners from the other side. In our case, of course, the usual popular countries on our side are the so-called the 3S, right? So we have Singapore, Sweden, and the first baby was the Swiss government. And we have had to learn from the entire process of creating or giving birth to a cooperative approach. And one lesson that I always mention is that many countries like us didn't know what we were going in for in terms of the effort, in terms of the need to bring people together, in terms of having champions in the government to be able to really have a commitment for almost a year to come up with an agreement that is agreeable to both sides. So the key point here is that for us, our major experience in creating the bilateral agreement was really about the need to bring people together. And people from different ministries and also from the office of the Attorney General, right? So that for us was a very important, and the stamina to engage in this process for almost 1 year. The other side was also to craft an agreement that is fair and standard across all the 3 countries. And at the same time, that is responsive to the requirement in the 6.4 or 6.2 guidelines. So how do we craft an agreement that is responsive to the requirement under 6.2 and at the same time responsive to the interest of the private sector and at the same time responsive to the interest of the government of the day? So we had to balance these 3 very entrenched interests across board. And that is also quite interesting. The other aspect of it is also that the bilateral agreement had to be approved at the highest political level. In our case, after the negotiations, we had to get approval from the office of the Attorney General. It ought to get to the cabinet for approval, and even after signing, it ought to go to Parliament for approval. So that is the extent of involvement of the political structures in giving birth to a bilateral agreement in the country. The other lesson that I've also learned is also that it also allows us to give meaning or give breath to the elements envisioned in the 6.2 framework or guideline. So how then do you put the requirement for corresponding adjustment in place in a bilateral agreement? How do you do that? Right. So for me, it was really a process of giving meaning to the elements in the Paris Agreement, and that was also really an interesting thing. Beyond that, we also further established a national framework, and the framework was further to the agreement. And again, in our case, we have to give further details as to how to operationalize all the agreements. How do you authorize? How do you approve a project for authorization? How do you ensure that there are clear ways and means of establishing which activities are eligible? How are they linked to the NDCs? So all of these elements, and even how to report and who is responsible for reporting. And all these elements from the Paris Agreement to the bilateral agreement to the framework is what we needed to be able to give birth to the project. And that, for us, is quite interesting. we are at a point where we have taken a bold step to authorize a first project with the Swiss government. And we are happy that we did that, and we think that that will further show that at least Article 6 can work in our countries. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. And of course, it's really interesting to see that a bold decision which is followed up consistently can lead to a very interesting outcome. So, yeah, we congratulate you to your achievement and are looking forward to see how the other countries follow your example. So now I would like to set the first panel discussion. So we have 4 excellent panelists here. We start with Maria Jose Podey from GIZ Morocco. Fenella Aouane, GGGI has already been mentioned several times. Then remotely we have Kaja Weldner from Perspectives and Daniela Lassmann from Perspectives directly here on the panel. So I would invite your statements, starting with Maria. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Axel. I would love to be based in Morocco. Unfortunately, I'm based in Germany, in Bonn. But happy to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. And also, so we see first important steps have been already taken for the successful implementation of Article 6. And thank you so much for the insight and the inspiring stories from Ghana and Morocco. Similar processes are on the way in further African countries, and this is for sure. But specifically in the Maghreb region, we can look back on decades of close cooperation that resulted in close partnerships, among which our long-standing cooperation and partnership with Morocco and Rachid Tahiri. Thank you so much, Rachid. Some concrete examples. GIZ supported the establishment of intersectoral climate committees and task force, inventory and MRV systems, sectoral and cross-sectoral strategies, stakeholder involvement. Before the NDCs, GIZ was already involved in the development of first mitigation approaches. Before Article 6, we were involved in several promising CDM pioneer projects. And after the call rules of Article 6 have been finalized in Glasgow, we hear that our partner countries are calling for capacity building, support and implementation of Article 6. Our experience at GIZ is that the partner wants to get ready and dive into the use of Article 6. They call for concrete and hands-on capacity building support as well as project development. So we hear you, and we at GIZ stand ready to do so. Capacity building is one of our core competences, and we have experiences in different areas. We are already implementing several capacity building projects in the African continent, jointly with our partner countries and on behalf of the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action. So for example, in Morocco, together with our partner of the NEC partnership, we are preparing capacity building activities with the Moroccan government. In Tunisia, we are developing a strategic vision for Article 6 in line with its NDCs. The project is called Global Carbon Markets and is commissioned by the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action. This project also supported the preparation of a mitigation process in the energy and industrial process sector for potential Article 6 projects and supported the elaboration of pilot projects. And currently, we're also kickstarting capacity building activities for the implementation of the African region on behalf of BMZ and in close cooperation with Rwanda and South Africa. This year, we have conducted an analysis of several partner countries to have a better understanding of the specific needs for the implementation of Article 6. To that, we developed 4 criteria as political strategies, as a baseline for the use of market mechanism, technical and infrastructure experiences, such as methodologies for emission accounting, monitoring and verification progress, regulatory criteria, and institutional setting, for example, the existence of stakeholder consultation and exchange formats. Within all these activities, we try to strengthen the decision-making power of our partner countries. We cooperate in unlocking the potential of Article 6. As you can see, a lot of work in preparation and implementation has already been done, and many activities in the Maghreb region and beyond are in the pipeline. Of course, we do not have all the answers to all the questions yet, since rules of Article 6 are still new and many questions regarding the implementation still need to be clarified. But within the jointly implemented and developed capacity building approach, we want to accompany and strengthen stakeholders in their transformation process, building a sustainable and enabling environment. Thank you so much. And giving back to you, Axel.
Thank you, Maria. So we now continue to Fenella. Well, of course, GGGI has been a pioneer in actual implementation. I'm looking forward to your intervention. Sorry for the technology, we don't get the remote from the organizer, so it means we need to shift a bit.
Well, while we're waiting, I'll just add to Daniel's earlier analogy that I was thinking, first of all, many congratulations to the country of Ghana for welcoming their new baby into the world, but a baby needs a midwife, and I think Daniel did an excellent job of being a midwife. And then I think as the African proverb goes, it takes a village to raise a child. So the governance framework that is in place will now hopefully support the trade and many more after it in Ghana. So, and now the slides are ready. Okay. Right, just very, very brief. It's as if I face this way, I'm looking at two people. It's like you're just ready to escape in case it gets a bit boring, but hopefully it won't do. Okay, so GGGI, for those who aren't aware, it might be easier if you can see the slides on the screens behind. Otherwise, I'm just looking at my own slides. Can you, hi. Can you get the slides up on the screen? Thanks. Okay, so GGGI is an intergovernmental organization. We work with our member countries. We are, importantly, relevant for this session, is we're embedded within the countries. So Mr. Tahiri, based in Morocco, works very closely with the Nassif, who is part of my team, who is based in the Ministry of Energy, and Majid, who is based in the Ministry of Environment, who are GGGI people who sit within the ministries, supporting on green growth and helping put in place policies and finding finance for green economic pathways. I'll carry on while they're trying to project the slides. Okay, so in carbon we're working in about 10 to 12 countries, which includes Morocco and Senegal and Zambia for the Maghreb and African region. We support countries by first of all helping to work out the market dynamics, then to help on the governance, then to help with the technical assistance of working with other partners. These are GIZ in some countries. Thank you very much for the slideshow there. GIZ in some countries, it could be the Climate Warehouse of the World Bank, it could be UNDP and their Article 6 training programs. Perspectives we've worked very closely with over many years. Then we're finding the pipeline of projects and then helping with the transactions. We actually did a survey, and it's available on our website, very specifically to ask, do our member countries want to be involved in Article 6 trading? What do they understand about it? Do they know about it or not? and what are the challenges for them. And this was a very interesting survey because what it came back with is that yes, they want to be involved, they want to be trading, they want to help. The added flexibility of Article 6.2 is good. What they found challenging or negative at the moment is their feeling was the buyer sets the price. The market is defined by the buyer. It's very difficult for the seller to have a voice in structuring transactions. And it's too early to know what they should be doing under Article 6, and a lack of capacity, importantly, for this. And then there was an even number of recipients who said there was a lack of awareness. So GGGI has, in answer to that survey, created the Carbon Transaction Platform, which will cover all of our carbon-related technical assistance and also look at fund management. So all of our current programs, so all of our help to Africa, Maghreb and other regions will come under this umbrella, and we hope that that will allow us to expand to more countries more quickly in order to open up the carbon markets faster. And also importantly to share the knowledge, very, very relevantly. It's great if these trades are done, but we're never going to scale up if we don't share the knowledge for them. So we feel this is a way to be able to do that. So specifically what we're doing, and I can bring in Morocco here, is this is quite a nice piece from the UNFCCC. National policies can assist in shifting investment and financial flows made by the private and public investors into climate-friendly alternatives and to optimize the use of available funds by spreading risk. But external funding will be needed, particularly for sectors in developing countries that depend on government intervention. What that is effectively saying is you need to change the policies as well as find projects. So what we're doing in Morocco is a very new area of carbon trading where we are directly trying to value the amount of tons of carbon reduced when a policy is put in place. So it's called our DAPA program, Designing Article 6 Policy Approaches. It couldn't be done under the CDM because there wasn't the methods available. But with 6.2, we can now look at it. I will admit it's not easy. We've been at it for a couple of years, 2.5 years, but we're getting very, very close, and we think the technical work should be finished soon, and the negotiations will be able to complete. Another program we have in that program is also, it's one in Morocco and two in Senegal. This program, Spark, is funded by the German government, and we're working in Zambia, in Africa, as well as 3 other countries. Here we feel that it's the important thing for capacity building here is the high ambition community of practice is the place where there is the knowledge sharing. The Article 6 toolbox is the guidance and the tools which will all be publicly available within the next year that can be used by any country. And that high ambition community of practice, importantly for both the donor and the implementing countries, includes youth element as well. So very much educating the next age on in the implementation countries. Then lastly, this is just to illustrate that we're not solely looking at markets under what was traditionally the compliance market. We feel we should be trying to get as much money through all types of markets into developing countries and emerging economies. And the only difference between a compliance market and a voluntary market now is really just a corresponding adjustment. What did we learn? The lessons we've learned. This is my last slide. So just lessons we've learned is that national needs you need to tailor things, build on what's already there. I think we've already heard from Ghana, you know, they had a registry for transportation inventory. So build on that, don't reinvent the wheel, don't try and go in fresh. You also need to, you can't take, one size does not fit all. So there are some great programs that are globally available that are a single program for capacity building. You then need to have that offer, but then you need to tailor it down to the country needs, is what we found. Fear of the unknown requires strong capacity building. So capacity building isn't a one-off. You need to continually, constantly do it. That's the village bringing up the child. It's not a go in, do a workshop, leave again. And I think, you know, everyone here has experienced that. And what I'm talking about, the point there on market norms, it's a bit of a nuanced point to get to. It's not a rule, but everyone knows that that's the way things are done. So it's how we got under the CDM, it's how we got 3/4 of an ERPA to be almost a boilerplate, instead of having to negotiate all 40 pages every time. So this happens by doing things and having buyers and sellers generally repeat processes over and over again. And then there is just lastly, some practical issues you need to be careful of. So, you know, the rules are developing, and almost, I would say, I think those last 2 points about CDM transition and the offering of the international registry being challenge points or problem points actually are almost solved now. So, you know, this is an evolving process. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Fenella. So now I hope that Kaja, who's our sole virtual speaker, is available. Kaja, can you hear us? Can you speak? Well, I hope there are technicalities. Yeah, Kaja is there.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, perfect. You have the floor.
Thank you, Axel. I want to talk about one type of support available for Article 6 readiness, particularly in Africa, and those are the regional alliances, the West African Alliance for Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, and the East African Alliance for Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, to both of which Perspectives Climate Group is a technical partner. And I don't think I have to go into depth about, you know, the complexity of capacity building for Article 6 and the challenges that especially countries in East and West Africa, and many of them are LDCs, are facing. So I just want to highlight in my presentation ways in which both alliances are able to address the needs and challenges of the countries. And maybe one more, you know, message before I go into this. The objective of both alliances, really, why they were founded, is to enable better access of African countries to Article 6, especially given, you know, the CDM experience of many of these countries in the past. And so both alliances really try to pool resources and knowledge around Article 6 and try to identify what types of knowledge can be made available at the regional level, and what kind of knowledge, going more into, you know, how to align Article 6 with the NDC. So what type of knowledge is more needs to be addressed at the national level, and I will show an example of this in a bit. And of course, one of the key elements as well is to enable mutual learning and peer-to-peer exchange. And I was very happy to hear the presentation of Mr. Benefo, because it's really a key example. yeah, many times Ghana has shared the process, you know, of coming up with the framework and the experience, and of course many other West African countries have benefited from you know this these insights through the West African Alliance. I think another key factor in which the regional alliances contribute to Article 6 capacity building is by raising awareness and momentum for Article 6 in the region. Of course, with you know, the national ministries and agencies involved in Article 6, but also with private sector and civil society. So on one of the pictures you see a private sector workshop organized by the East African Alliance. And also in the context of the West African Alliance, the objective is really to achieve to create an awareness at the highest political level about Article 6 and achieve this kind of political buy-in, which we heard already is really crucial to bring forward Article 6 in the country. Both alliances also have a really broad network of international partners and organizations. So on the regional level, for example, but also international organizations and bilateral partners. And here, countries, on the one hand, they can benefit from these networks by, you know, having an enhanced awareness about opportunities and resources available, but it also goes the other way, in which, you know, the alliances can consolidate and formulate a kind of a regional can communicate the regional needs when it comes to capacity building and the regional priorities. And the last thing I want to highlight, you know, is the participation in the rural development, especially in the UNFCCC. Both alliances really take great care to enable the participation of you know, Article 6 delegates in the negotiations, and also prepare them in workshops and exchange around the issues and the positions that are relevant for West Africa and in East Africa, and of course also engaging with the African group of negotiators on these issues. So this is the broad picture that I wanted to show you of how really these alliances are a great example of capacity building that's, you know, not just transferring knowledge or, you know, doing a one-time workshop, but it's really a continuous process of learning and peer-to-peer engagement. And I want to take a few more minutes to highlight one particular example, which we call the blueprint process. And this shows very well, I think, also this, well, the challenge or to, on the one hand, bring in, think about what activities are important on or can be addressed on the regional level, and on the other hand, combine this with support that addresses national priorities and national needs that are specific to countries. So we started early this year but with working on what we call an Article 6 readiness blueprint, and you can access it on the Alliance website, where we try to really give a practitioner-oriented, so to say, overview of what is needed to be Article 6 ready, of course with the information and rules available at that time. And we accompanied this with a workshop series that is still ongoing, in which we invited the national focal points of the West African Alliance, in this case, to deepen the discussion on the specific elements of Article 6 readiness that we were talking about in the blueprint. So NDC alignment, Article 6 policies and frameworks, and then the institutional setup and other workshops on CDM transition, and the more infrastructural requirements are still to come. So we want to use these workshops to gather the feedback and to be able in the end to update the blueprint with information and insights that are even better tailored towards the needs in the region. But on the other hand, we also recognize that this regional process alone is not sufficient, and therefore we have engaged with countries who showed interest in what we call national readiness support, and we've agreed on individual support plans that really address their priorities. For example, in Burkina Faso, we're now starting to work on thinking around the transition of their CDM activities. And there as well, it's really important for the Alliance and for us as technical partners to be coordinating with other partners in the country to make sure that there is a high amount of synergy and no duplication of work. And I want to leave it at that. And a key takeaways, I think the alliances are really a key initiatives for Article 6 capacity building. I hope that came across. And maybe one thing I can highlight on this slide, of course, is the partnership with the RCCs. Financial administration of the West African Alliance, for example, is hosted within the BOAD. So there's a very strong link with the RCCs, and I think that's very important also in view of the development of the UNFCCC capacity building program, which of course is very important for countries in the region. And now with that, I want to finish the presentation, and I invite you to have a look at the websites, engage with Alliance members on the ground, and thank you very much. Axel, I hand back to you in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaja. And now I would like to pass on to Daniela Lassmann. Dani, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Axel. Can you please put up the slides?
Just to say, we have a bit of leeway to exceed the timing because we'll have another side event by the same, let's say, actors immediately afterwards. So I'll have, for the first time in my UNFC COP side event live, the possibility to exert some flexibility. Dani, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and thanks a lot for joining today. After we have now heard about these really interesting initiatives that different organizations are realizing, and also the two countries' Article 6 strategies, I would now like to invite you to explore a little bit how Article 6 could be operationalized with an example of Morocco and Morocco's cooling sector. And first of all, I would like to give you a brief overview of the refrigeration and air conditioning sector in Morocco before I start exploring a little bit how Article 6 in the cooling sector could look like. So this is basically some information on the refrigerator and air conditioning market in Morocco. So what we can say is the building sector in Morocco contributes significantly to the national final energy consumption by about 1/3. And this, of course, also results in significant share of greenhouse gas emissions, which is why the government decided to reduce energy consumption in this sector by 14%, which is also included in the country's NDC. Also, refrigeration, especially like household refrigerators and those equipment, accounts for almost half of the building's electricity consumption, whereas at the same time air conditioning accounts for less than 5%. So one can see that air conditioners are not so much in use at the moment in Morocco, but this, according to projections, for instance, of the IEA, will change tremendously in the next couple of years. So the IEA, for instance, estimates that about 40% of households could have an air conditioner by 2030. And this also relates to, of course, an increase in greenhouse gas emissions. For instance, cooling devices usually have a twofold, let's say, climate impact. First of all, from the energy or electricity consumption, but also from the cooling agents, the refrigerants that are used by such devices, which, for instance, can be synthetic gases like HFCs. So what one can see is that also in the last years, the HFC consumption in Morocco showed a steep increase. So from 2015 to 2019, the consumption was about 10 times higher. And this also relates, for instance, to the business as usual scenario, which is projected to more or less double in the period 2020 to 2030 if no further action is taken in this sector. And that basically means that greenhouse gas emissions stemming from energy or electricity consumption plus the refrigerants will see a steep increase in the next couple of years. Another important factor why one should accelerate mitigation actions in the cooling sector is specifically the, let's say, refrigerants, the HFC refrigerants related to the Kigali Amendment. So, the Kigali Amendment under the Montreal Protocol basically mandates countries to reduce their HFC consumption in the next years. So for most developing countries, this will be done in a stepwise manner, and they have to reduce their HFC consumption by about 80% by 2030. But on the other hand, it is evident that this is not in line with the 1 degree Celsius objective of the Paris Agreement. Recent studies have shown that the current Kigali Amendment as it is and the targets, if they are fully complied with, they will only save about 50% of HFCs until 2050, which is not in line with the overall goal of the Paris Agreement. Whereas global HFC emissions should be reduced by about 75 to 80%. Compared to 2010. And this is also what the graphic at the left shows here. So of course you have the baseline scenario, which is the black line with the steep increase, but then you have the lower black line, which shows full compliance with the Kigali Amendment, which of course is higher than it should be in 2050. And only an accelerated action, which is basically the yellow line, can support the Paris Agreement goals. If one considers Article 6 activities in the cooling sector, one has to also take into account some specific requirements, especially if we are talking about HFCs. So first of all, countries should have ratified the Kigali Amendment, and secondly, they should make sure that HFCs, and depending on which kind of activity they want to conduct, they should also include HCFCs in NDCs. So with the HFCs, it's not so much of a problem because they're already part of the Kyoto basket of gases, and for many countries they are already covered in the NDCs, but HCFCs are not. However, there is a possibility to include those ODS or HFCs in their NDCs and therefore also in their Article 6 activities. And last but not least, another requirement would be the accounting, which needs to be synchronized between, for instance, the Montreal Protocol and the Paris Agreement. So one would basically, or countries would basically have to quantify GHG targets also, for instance, for HCFC refrigerants to be able to fulfill the general principles for reporting under the UNFCCC. So, but if we are talking about green cooling, what is this exactly? And this is just to briefly give you a definition of what green air conditioners and refrigerators are. Those are basically devices with a which are highly energy efficient, which use refrigerants with negligible climate impact, such as, for instance, also natural refrigerants, propane or ammonia. And they usually come up with a higher upfront price due to these specific parameters. What also needs to be taken into account that for some devices, like for instance ACs, one need to have trained technicians that can install and maintain such devices, since they come with a certain safety issues such as flammability of, for instance, propane. So those are all aspects that need to be considered when designing an Article 6 activity in the cooling sector. And this is to briefly also go through the barriers that one faces when introducing green cooling equipment, green refrigerators and ACs. So first of all, there are the policy and regulatory barriers. So for instance, energy efficiency standards, or also lack of regulation of, let's say, HFC consumption. You would have financial barriers like higher costs. Then you have a lack of consumer behavior. And there are also some technical barriers, as mentioned before, like, for instance, there's not a skilled workforce available, or in many cases, you also have a lack of supply and demand. So how could such a blended finance approach could look like in the cooling sector? Basically, one would need to see what would be financial incentive mechanisms that address the novelty and price barriers. And this could be, for instance, combined with green credit lines that are already existing or that are introduced by national credit institutes, national banks. And ITMO revenues, carbon market revenues, could be used to complement such a green credit line to basically lower the upfront cost, which then, of course, would also reduce payback periods. And you can see it there in the graph how this would basically look like. So also with the ITMOs that are then transferred, of course, to the buyer country. But there are also other financial and policy instruments that could be combined. For instance, a reduction of import tariffs for green refrigerators and ACs, or also bulk procurement programs. So those are all different kinds of financial instruments that could be blended with Article 6 and ITMO revenues to basically introduce green cooling equipment in a country. So with that, I would like to end my presentation and hand back to Axel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dani. So this now leads us to the second round of panel, where we look into buyers, and it has been mentioned various times, for example, by Fenella, the role of the buyers in her survey. So I'm really happy to have here 4 important entities, including governments and public-private partnerships. So without further ado, I would like to invite Veronika Elgard from the Federal Agency of the Environment in Switzerland.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Try to be close. A pleasure to be on this panel, of course, with our appreciated partners, Morocco and Ghana, and all the other partners are on the table. It has been said it takes a family to take things off the ground, and very much agree with that. So much appreciating everyone's engagement. Let me, of course, much appreciate and commend our partners from Morocco. We have signed a bilateral agreement at this COP, now starting to be implemented, and we're looking very much forward to that. And equally to Ghana, who we have authorized the very first Article 6 activity and the ITMOs from that activity at this COP as well. This is all very encouraging to us, and I will share some lessons learned from the Swiss perspective that we have from this joint journey that we had with our partners. And it may be with no much surprise, it's actually quite similar to our partners, because we at least, we've perceived that as a truly joint journey, finding out together how to do things that they benefit both countries and the global climate. But let me nevertheless highlight from our perspective a few issues. Some recommendations maybe that we would make, for ourselves going forward and for others interested in the room. We have found extremely useful to start early. And I think that has been addressed before very clearly by Daniel from Ghana as well. It takes a national debate to engage in carbon markets or the Article 6, and that needs to happen rather early than late to find out in what way these carbon markets can be beneficial to a country. And at the same time, it also helped us a lot to reach out very early to partners at the international level to find out together how to do things right. So I can just echo that engaging early also from the government side is very helpful in this journey. At the same time, it was also very important from our point of view to leave flexibility to learn along the way. So start doing things, but learn along the way. And we believe in the bilateral agreements that we are signing with our partner countries, this flexibility is embedded. It's one of the central pieces. We set some of the firm framework conditions for ensuring integrity, but then we leave a lot of the decision-making to national frameworks. So each country can learn along the way and establish a national strategy for carbon markets. So that is my second point here. Start early, but also leave flexibility to learn along the way. And while starting early and engaging in these first activities, there should be a strategy developed, we believe, in every country, how to use the carbon markets best. The Article 6 provides host countries in particular in a strengthened position to guide carbon finance into sectors and activities that benefit the country most. And that should be taken, the opportunity should be taken here. And this will take time, and learning while doing, allowing for this to be mutually supportive, has proven from our perspective a very promising way to go. Let me say that we strongly are engaged to maximize the benefits of Article 6 activities to our partner countries for their economies and their societies, because we strongly believe this will increase the climate effect of the entire Article 6 engagement, and therefore is also in our own interest as Switzerland. So this strengthened role of host countries we very much welcome, and we see a great opportunity there for the climate. And thirdly, maybe a recommendation that we have for ourselves written down to take forward is to take the opportunity to act now. We see a lot of interest in carbon markets. We believe we can do and have that enshrined in our domestic legislation, in bilateral agreements, and we see that with our partner countries, that we will only authorize additional action. So this is positive for the climate. From the Swiss side, we have a national setup where the funds that are being mobilized for Article 6 are additional to international climate finance. They are raised and mobilized from the private sector of Switzerland. So again, this puts us in a position to actually deliver on enhanced global ambition. And we should take this opportunity and start implementing rather sooner than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronica, and I'm really happy to see here the pioneers on this panel together, from the seller, from the buyer side, and I think we are getting to a family. We've been sitting in negotiation rooms until the wee hours, but now it's the rubber hits the road. So I'm really very happy also as someone who has been working on international carbon markets for the last 30 years to really materialize the action. I would now like to turn to Ursula Flossmann-Kraus from CLIC, which is a highly innovative public-private partnership. Ursula, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Axel. Thanks for the organizers to invite us to this panel, and for the fellow panelists for their very interesting and timely interventions. The CLIC Foundation is the Swiss agency tasked with the procurement of ITMOs towards the international pledges in the Swiss NDC. To this end, we work with partner countries, and we are a provider of results-based finance. In preparation of this round, I was asked to shed light a little bit on the specific requirements for those types of programs beyond what is already available in the Article 6.2 or 6.4 guidance. And as Veronica has shed light on the work, the dialogue between the countries, Switzerland as the buyer country, the host countries as the seller countries. There's a lot of mutual learning and dialogue happening with them. We work kind of underneath on a commercial level, and we have also additional requirements for these types of programs. So the framework agreements, they actually set the rules, the standards such as environmental integrity, human rights, no double accounting, so corresponding adjustments. The Swiss national framework also sets additional requirements. So for example, we can't do any afforestation, reforestation, or large-scale hydro. We, as a compliance buyer, certainly also have additional points to consider. For example, we are looking for mature approaches, so no pilots, sorry. We are looking for larger scale programs. For example, we're looking for robust business cases and bankable approaching. Ideally, the financing is already available. And of course, we look also for synergies across our portfolio. And here, the RAC sector, as was presented by Daniela, definitely has a great potential. And recommendations, perhaps, to countries that are also planning to engage in this type of cooperation is, perhaps look also at the example of others, of early mover countries. Congratulations to Morocco for having signed the bilateral agreement with Switzerland. Also congratulations for all the important groundwork that has already happened. Monsieur Tahiri has shed light on that when presenting to us the scenario work that has been done, the task force that has been set up, the important process steps and formats. These are all exactly important work that needs to be done. So recommendation perhaps is, start small, later increase the scope, but get started early. These frameworks are really important. The NDC analysis, the institutional arrangements, they all have to be prepared, and that takes time. And perhaps from our experience, some important readiness factors for this type of cooperation are first, engagement and leadership, really. So host countries are in the driver's seat. So it was interesting to see the results of the survey presented by Fenella first. Host countries really are in the driver's seat. They can choose what they want to do under Article 6. So it's important to get those frameworks in place that guide the activities for Article 6 cooperation. Then secondly, data, knowledge, tools, those are important, and luckily there is a lot of support available through partners like Perspectives, for example. And third, partnerships in general. So partners for financing, partners for capacity building, but also peers, other countries that have already engaged in this type of cooperations, that have already started, that have done the heavy lifting, and that are also ready to share their experience with others. Thank you, Axel.
Thank you, Ursula. And now we would like to move to Sandra Lindström from Sweden. Sandra, you have the floor.
Good evening, all. My name is Sandra Lindström. I'm the head of International Climate Cooperation at the Swedish Energy Agency. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I'm happy to be here in this panel with our friends, countries, and the partners that we are engaged with in developing Article 6. Let me say a few words about Sweden's ambition with regards to Article 6. So Sweden has a net zero goal by 2040 to be achieved by latest 2045. And it has been decided that portion of these emission reductions can be achieved by supplementary measures, and one of those is Article 6. So Sweden has really been engaged in developing pilots in Article 6 since 2018, and it has been a long road finding partners, finding countries to do the Article 6. I think things have really changed just the past year since the Glasgow Agreement came into place. We see more countries and more companies that are willing to engage in Article 6 and really try to develop programs. So a few words about the status of Sweden's Article 6 development. We have signed an MOU with Ghana, Dominican Republic, and Nepal. And the next steps here is that we will sign bilateral agreement, and our first bilateral agreement will hopefully be signed with Ghana in a couple of weeks. And the bilateral agreement basically stipulates how the corresponding adjustments will be made, how the transfer will be done, and how the authorization and approval process will be made. So a couple of things with regards to the lessons learned. I think it has been already mentioned by Ursula and Veronica as well, the importance of being an early mover. And I really agree that there is a benefit of being early mover. We can influence the rules. We can be setting the ground for how this can be done. But also I recognize there's the risk of being criticized. We don't know how to do this. We are all newcomers to how Article 6 is being done. And so I think that's one of the reasons why many countries have being hesitant in the past. But just want to emphasize that I really think that there's a benefit of being an early mover. Another lessons learned is that I think perfection is our enemy. Since we don't really know how things how things should be done, there can be mistakes. And I think we just have to accept that these mistakes can be made in our effort to do the right thing, because we don't want to repeat the mistakes that were done in the CDM. I think there's a hesitant to move forward by many, and just want to say that we just have to come up with the best practices and learn from our mistake, and hopefully in a couple of years we have more routine in how to do these programs of Article 6. And the third one that I just want to raise, the private sector. I think it has been raised by colleagues of mine here, but we need to involve the private sector. And I'm so happy to be here at the COP27 and see that there's an increased interest from the private sector to be engaged in Article 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And now I'm really happy that we have with us Mr. Ruyun Gan from Singapore. Singapore has in record time become a key player in Article 6, a key player in the overall carbon market ecosystem. So I'm really looking forward to hear what you have to bring to our table.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having Singapore here on the panel. So I think before I start, perhaps I can share a bit more about Singapore's strategy towards Article 6. I think last year we have concluded the broad Article 6 rulebook. So it already provides sufficient guidance for us to move on and to actually start operationalizing Article 6 and to implement voluntary cooperative approaches to advance global climate action. So to that, I think we have started our engagement with various countries and with Morocco as well as Ghana. And today we announced that with Ghana, we have substantively concluded our negotiations on implementation agreement. So we hope to sign it soon, as well as we hope to sign it with Morocco as well when we actually conclude our negotiations in due course. So for our approach, I think firstly, why do we need carbon credits? I think for us, we have raised our carbon tax earlier this year in tandem of raising our climate ambition. So our taxable companies will be allowed to offset up to 5% of their taxable emissions with international offsets that is aligned with Article 6. And for us, we intend to use offset programs that are out there, leveraging their methodologies. So to that, I think currently we are thinking of using CORSIA as the minimum basis and then building on top of it together with Article 6.2 requirement. Now I will share a bit more about what are the lessons learned. I think this is a learning by doing experience, and through our, it's definitely a two-way kind of dialogue with our partners and to learn from each other and take the best practices out of this. And through the 1 year long process of G2G engagement with various governments out there, we actually learned a lot. So I think to share a few key lessons that we got out of this is that the first thing is we need national framework. Having a national framework in the host countries. Sorry. Hi. Yeah, can you all hear me? Okay. So sorry. Yeah, so I was saying that there are a few lessons learned through the mutual exchange of experiences during our government-to-government engagement. So firstly is on national framework. I think it's really important for countries to set out their own national frameworks. It provides the basis for them to engage countries that wish to enter into cooperative approaches with them, and it actually gives them comfort on what is additional, and this additional is actually determined by their NDC implementation plan. Of course, this is, like I say, this is a learning by doing opportunity, so sometimes we are also open to start with pilot projects, so countries shouldn't be shying away from working on pilot projects as well. So we have signed various MOUs with countries, and there are varying difference between the MOUs that we sign. Some actually start with pilot project to help inform their national framework. Some actually move towards leveraging their national framework to start implementation. And of course, MOU is just an indication of interest. So we are now working on the concrete substance on the implementation agreement with various countries. And of course, through this process, it's important for the host countries to identify areas that are truly additional so that they don't actually oversell and undermine their climate ambition as well as climate action. Yeah, so I think I will stop here, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now I would give us the privilege of having 5 minutes overtime because, as I said, we have a back-to-back side event, so for the first time we can squeeze the break a bit. So I would invite questions from the audience. Anyone who wants to come in? Okay, interesting. Well, use the opportunity. Well, it seems that everything has been very clear, so of course I would thank the panel. I think you've heard about now really the rubber hitting the road in Morocco, in Ghana. Buyers are ready, sellers are getting ready. So after many years of preparation, we see Article 6 becoming a reality. I'm very happy that this is the case. And of course, I hope that the people sitting in the negotiation rooms, and that probably explains why such a high quality panel has only so little attendance and participants, that they generate the conditions that we can continue and have at the next COP in Dubai another round of this. But I see a question, so can someone bring a portable microphone? Well, I think we have actually some mic. So, please.
Hi. I left to the end because it's actually about
just name and institution,
the voluntary
please.
markets. My name's Nicola Steen. I work for a company called Encompass. And I wanted to ask Fenella, in your last slide, I could ask you privately if you think it's a red herring, but you did say that the difference between the voluntary markets and the compliance, as they were called, was whether you needed corresponding adjustment. But on your slide, you seem to make a distinction between offsetting, which needed corresponding adjustments, and voluntary finance, which didn't. And I'm wondering as well if there's some sort of way we can make a distinction with semantics, because, you know, I personally am very nervous about having corresponding adjustments attached to all emission reductions because of past experiences that you're aware of trying to get governments to sign on to certain things. And I think poorer people in particular in poor countries are really going to suffer if that is what happens. And the logic, I did post something with Edwin Alders last year that people can see on LinkedIn, just making the logic about why this is not necessary. It's just an accounting thing. Thank you.
No problem, Nicola. Thank you for the question. I think what my slide was trying to show was not you have to have this. It was showing that if you apply a corresponding adjustment, the resultant ITMO could be used for CORSIA, it could be used for offsetting, it could be used for compliance, it could be used for anything. If you do not apply a corresponding adjustment, it could be used for offsetting in the voluntary market, and/or it could be, importantly, used in a domestic offsetting environment. And I use the example of Colombia. I think, this is not something that I am going to answer. It's something for the bigger market to answer. And we don't see it as trying to move the voluntary market to another space. Where we're seeing it is compliance markets spreading. So what we have here, and the reason I didn't bring it up is it's not necessarily for this panel. This is a panel showing you what the first step is. This is a panel that has shown you governments are buying. However, there's also one further step on from governments buying, and that's Ursula here, who is private sector buying, with strong government buying, with Veronica very involved with the transaction. That could morph in the future into the corresponding adjustment bit and the government involvement bit merely being a tiny thing done miles away and we don't really notice it. It's an accounting piece of paperwork. It's not something that is huge involvement. So if we look at a country like Korea, for example, or Japan, they want their private sectors to be doing the buying. They don't want, as a government, to be doing the buying. So they're trying to work out, okay, how do we just make this corresponding adjustment bit? You know, we have to have a bilateral agreement with the seller countries. We need to make sure that it is absolutely aligned with the targets of that country. So they have to set up their strategies, etc. And Veronica's explained very clearly, and Sandra, you know, this is, you're walking hand in hand with the sellers here. So how do you make sure that that's done and then bring in the private sector? So that's effectively a voluntary market with a corresponding adjustment. It's just done the other way round. So I don't think we should look at it as the voluntary market trying to be squashed. I would look at it the other way round of expanding the government to government transactions into private sector now as the first step of that we see with Click. Yeah?
Thanks, Fenella. I would allow one further question and then like to close. Anyone? Yes, please, in the back.
Thank you for the panelists for all the presentations and for all the great work so far. So this is a question more general,
so please,
perhaps.
Please name and background institutions. Always good for everyone to know who is speaking.
Rodrigo Chaparro from Tetra Tech. So my question is, what do you think, Alex, will be the fair price for the ITMOs, or a price range that will make this market really scale up and taking off?
Thank you. Well, prices are well kept secret. Is anyone willing to engage on this question?
Thank you very much. I can just share from our setup by how the bilateral agreements that Switzerland is signing is set up is that governments set the framework conditions. They clarify the rules of the game and we give legal certainty for investments. We authorize activities and ITMOs. And then it is mainly a third party who will be taking activities forward, investing, concluding commercial agreements, which also define the price. So we as the Swiss government, we are not engaged in the price, in fact. Our bilateral agreements set up both governments, namely here the host country, by the decision what they authorize to guide carbon finance into sectors and activities where this should go. Of course, every national framework can have additional elements, but that is as far as from the Swiss side, we are engaging in this. Is the activities that we authorize, not so much the price from the Swiss government side.
And perhaps just to complement and add, so we as the CLIC Foundation, as a compliance buyer, we pay prices based on the actual costs of a mitigation activity of a program. So as part of the development of a program, of the development of the monitoring plan, the emission reduction calculation, methodology, and the parameters, the setup of the institutional setup, and the design, the documents of the program. As part of that, we will also see then a business model really clearly involved with a lot of detail on the expected costs and as well as expected revenues, because our carbon finance should be an additional revenue stream, and the program as such should already be revenue generating, and our carbon finance really should be the additional cash flow that makes the activity economically viable. So the price we pay is really what is needed to get the activity off the ground based on the actual cost.
Thank you very much. I think this was a fitting end of today's event, so I would invite you to give an applause to the panel, and I'm looking forward to the sequel in Dubai.